When I got out of college, I rather naively said, I'll start my own film company, I'll do the projects that I wanted to do, I'd be my own boss, and I starved. I ended up taking freelance jobs a day at a time, a couple days a month to pay the rent. But I struggled to look for that thing that could be my own, that I could do on my own. And I was reading a book that a friend had given me on the building of the Brooklyn Bridge by David McCullough. And it was so exciting to me. It was a superbly written history, but it also had a respect for the power of the past to speak for itself. And I felt that some things I'd already experimented with in some college films of using diaries and journals and letters, I could apply that same unformed curiosity in a story of the building of the Brooklyn Bridge.
It took 14 long years to build the bridge, from 1869 to 1883. Years during which Edison invented the light bulb and the phonograph, Alexander Graham Bell the telephone. The buffalo were exterminated on the Great Plains. The curveball and catcher's mask were introduced into baseball. President Chester A. Arthur installed plumbing in the White House. In Europe, Marx died, and Einstein, Lenin, and Picasso were born.
I looked about 12 years old. People said, this kid is trying to sell me the Brooklyn Bridge, and slammed the door. I just kept at it for 2.5 years. I finally assembled enough, maybe $50,000 to begin shooting, and starved still for the next 2 or 3 years. After I'd finished shooting and amassed a great pile of archives, a great pile of interviews I felt, and some beautiful live cinematography taken of the bridge at every time of day and night from every particular vantage, then became the biggest and most difficult question, which was, how do you put it together? What makes a good history film? How do you use these voices of the past? How do you interweave interviews? How do you appreciate historical moment? How do you make a still photograph come alive?
The whole army of the United States could not restore the institution of slavery in the South. They can't get back their slaves any more than they can get back their dead grandfathers. It is dead. William Tecumseh Sherman.
All of these questions we hadn't really thought of. I don't know where the interest in history comes. It's been there all my life. I read encyclopedias and not novels as a kid growing up. That's the earliest. That's a daguerreotype, which I believe I've now brought down. I was always interested, particularly in American history, what made us tick, what this big, complicated family was all about.
Here, look at this. You see, you're getting the tree and the...
It seems to be a place where I can exercise my interest in film. I'm first and foremost a filmmaker. History is like a painter choosing oils as opposed to watercolors. History is just the medium in which I find the most satisfying self-expression. We still use the same small crew. 2 or 3 of us, that's it. A typical day would be getting up well before dawn and driving out to some vantage point, perhaps on the Brooklyn side, perhaps on the Manhattan side, perhaps climbing some old building and poking a camera out a window there. Perhaps it's late in the afternoon and begging a secretary to move from her desk on the 16th floor of the municipal building because out her window is the one true spot where you can collapse the 2 towers together. We did a lot of that. And it was exciting and filled with ideas that we could just sort of think of that morning and try out. Time-lapse things we did, shooting in the snow. I remember going out one day on a rainy day, and we weren't really sure why we were out there. It was sort of whitish gray and terrible, and all of a sudden the sky opened up in the west. And we took a series of shots. I still remember to this day, this was in 1979, it was roll 53. We took a series of shots, 6 or 7 shots in the 3 or 4 minutes that this light was there. I have never yet in my life seen light duplicated this way. That was so stunning, so hard, so beautiful with an orange western light, gray, white, but incredibly defined clouds. What it did to the tugboats coming up what it did to the bridge was unspeakable. And I can remember that as a epiphany of filmmaking. I've also been willing to listen to the past and what it has to say. You go and you explore in one of the greatest documentary detective areas that I know, all the old photographs. And instead of filming them at arm's length like a slideshow, you go into them and you trust that is the closest representation to the reality of what it was back then as I'll ever get. So treat it as such, like a feature filmmaker would a long shot, and then go in and do your close-ups and your cutaways and your medium shots, and use a still photograph, listen to a still photograph in a way, and help make the past come alive. I've been working in two parallel tracks for the last several years. The one is completing, I guess what you'd call is a major trilogy that began with the Civil War, continued with baseball, and now in the history of jazz will find its fruition. It's a story, the great epic stories of America, a lot to do with race. And I'm now in the middle of editing what will probably be a 10-part, perhaps 20-hour history of jazz in America from its origins, more or less up to the present time. We're, I'd say, halfway through editing and struggling with structure and making these stories come together.
What we have is the ability to replicate the old 19th century Western thing.
Every day is new. Every day has a new discovery. Every day has a new challenge. And every day throws something else out and sends us out looking for a new thing. It's great. In addition, I've been always interested since the beginning, since the Roeblings built the Brooklyn Bridge, in biography. That history is biography, as Thomas Carlyle said. And so I have, for several years, been working on a series of 5 biographies. The first was Thomas Jefferson. The second was Lewis and Clark. The third is Frank Lloyd Wright. The fourth is Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and the fifth will be on Mark Twain. We're now approaching a rough cut in the Stanton Anthony, which will be 2 90-minute films, which will be broadcast in the fall of '99.
You're more interested in the Women's Rights Convention pamphlet than the letter?
Yeah, but the Frederick signature is also on this too.
It is a wonderful story, an untold story of perhaps the most important advance in human rights since our American Revolution, and a story that has given short shrift in every history textbook that I've ever seen. We are just now gearing up to start production, filming on a biography of Mark Twain, who has come to represent not only the humor and light side of American life and literature, but also a dark, but no less equally American side of our character. To me, the joy of making films is not in having them finished and getting an award. The joy is in the solving of those myriad problems. The point is that we make these films not to be perfect, but we make these films for ourselves to be better people. And so I look at Brooklyn Bridge, I look at the Shakers, I look at any of the things that I've done as efforts at trying to be better, at efforts at trying to learn something new, of improving a facet of myself, educating a part that needed growing up. And I don't know in one's whole life long whether you could ever stop doing that, and which is what makes me feel like I have the best job in the country.